Hi everyone, I am Anne and in this video I tell you everything I know about drawing with pen and ink while showing you how I made this artwork of a pair of boots from start to finish. So grab a drink and some snacks or two because this is a long one. Let's get started. Every drawing starts with a paper. The choice of the paper makes a huge difference in the outcome of the drawing. There is paper made specifically for pen applications, for example Bristol paper. That surface is usually very slick and smooth, resulting in very clean lines. Depending on what you want your drawing to look like, you can also choose watercolor paper. Hot press watercolor paper has a smooth surface and cold press has a texture to it. I use cold press paper for some of my birds, for example. If you barely scratch the paper with your pen, you can produce very thin lines and you can shade almost like you would with a graphite pencil. For this artwork I wanted very clean lines and I wanted to be able to add ink wash on top, so I chose hot press watercolor paper. In the end I didn't add any ink wash, but it's still a suitable surface for the medium. Making some small sketches on different types of papers is a great way to see how it behaves and what's the best fit for your artwork. Of course, you can't draw without pens. Are you gonna choose fineliners or dip pens? Both has their pros and cons. Fineliners are quick, have a wide range of sizes which you can choose from and don't require cleaning afterwards. Dip pens are slower and might require some practice as a beginning to avoid splattering. I never had that issue though. Just make sure you drag the nib across the paper instead of pushing it and don't overload the nib when dipping in the ink. Depending on the flexibility of the nib, you can vary your line width with just one pen, and you can choose which color of ink you want to draw with. I just like the authentic feel of that metal nib scratching the paper. A fountain pen is a little bit of both worlds. For this artwork I chose a dip pen in combination with black waterproof ink. Whatever you choose, the drawing techniques from this video apply for all these pens. When we draw with pen, we don't rely on color or shading like we do with a pencil, we rely on lines. And two of the most powerful techniques to create depth and form are cross-hatching and cross-contour lines. Cross-hatching is the layering of parallel lines in different directions to build tone and texture. The closer and denser the lines, the darker the area appears. Cross-contour lines, on the other hand, follow the shape of the object itself, like the coat or jacket that I'm working on right now. It has a lot of folds and creases in the fabric that I want to include in the drawing. Imagine that you could touch it and you would follow all those folds and creases with your fingers. In which direction would it be? Drawing lines in the direction an object is shaped shows how a form turns in space. While hatching builds value, cross-contour lines build volume. Together, these techniques give life to your drawing. They turn flat shapes into three-dimensional forms and bring a sense of movement to still objects. Hatching and cross-contour lines goes hand in hand with another fundamental element of art, value. Value is the darkness or lightness of a color. The range of tones that give a drawing depth and dimension. I started this artwork in the upper left hand corner, not only because I'm right-handed and I won't smear the ink that way, but also because that's a dark area. Dark areas are a bit more forgiving because if you make a mistake, you can cover it up with an extra layer or two. But even when working in black ink in a dark area, difference in value still exists. It's what helps the viewer understand where the light hits and where the shadows fall. If it lacks a value on one end of the spectrum, your artwork might look flat and boring. Value guides the eye, it tells a story of light, form and contrast. Making a value scale on a separate piece of paper that you can use as a cheat sheet can help you during the final drawing. It might not look like it, but starting a new artwork always makes me a bit nervous and anxious, especially with such a permanent medium like pen and ink. So the dark corner helped me to loosen up a bit and to get that rust off my fingers. If you find pen and ink also a bit intimidating, choose an image or subject you're excited about. That helps getting the job done. When I came across this photo of some old boots on Pixabay, I just knew I had to draw this. I'll link it in the description. I really love the contrast and the lighting in this picture. But don't overthink it, every subject looks great in a pen drawing, even just common household objects. Just make sure you use an image with the proper rights. If it's not copyright free, you can get into trouble if you use it. So if you don't draw from life or from your own photos, websites with copyright free stock images like Pixabay or Unsplash are your best friends. Pictures on Pinterest are not necessarily copyright free, so try to avoid using that platform for references, especially if you want to sell the finished artwork. But when you finally found an interesting subject, and before you can even start, you need to get the sketch on the paper. I often hear people say, "I'm not good at drawing." Don't let your drawing skills hold you back from it. Although it's good to improve your sketching skills, there are many ways to transfer an image onto paper. Using the grid technique, for example, or a graphite transfer. But discussing those can be a whole video on its own. Don't worry, a little bit of help for the sketch is not cheating. Having only a few traced pencil lines on the paper doesn't make it into a finished artwork. All the hard work is yet to come. And even if you can draw, it can help to get the right proportions in the right place just a little bit quicker and more accurate. Especially for images with this amount of detail. So please don't be too hard on yourself and don't judge too quick. When you finally have the sketch on the paper, one way or the other, fear of failure might creep in. It's something we all know, myself included. Drawing is supposed to be fun, but there's that quiet voice that says, "Don't start, you might ruin it." Fear of failure is the hesitation to create, because we're afraid the result won't meet our expectations. It's not just fear of the permanent ink itself, it's fear of judgment, of imperfection, or worse, wasted effort. We want things to look effortless and beautiful, but creativity rarely works that way. This fear often comes from comparison. We see perfect artworks online, and we forget that behind every perfect line there were hundreds of messy ones. Perfection looks inspiring, but it can also make us afraid to even start, and the permanence of ink only amplifies that. One wrong move feels like a failure. The only way to overcome that fear is to redefine what failure means. A smudge? A shaky line? A spill? They're not signs of failure, they're signs of a human being. Each mark is proof that you were brave enough to put ink on paper. Perfection is not a goal, expression is. So when you hesitate before making that first stroke, remember, you can't make progress without mistakes. And sometimes the most beautiful pieces are the ones that carry a trace of imperfection, a reminder that they were made by a human hand. Besides, the world doesn't end if it doesn't turn out the way you wanted it to. Set the paper aside, start again and apply what you've learned along the way. Fear of failure often creeps in at the start of a new drawing or when starting on a new area. With pen and ink, there are stages where everything looks wrong, especially at the beginning, when your first few strokes are fully surrounded with white paper. A subject with a smooth surface, for example, can look hairy because you build up the image with lines. So especially at the start, it's the moment where you're most tempted to give up, to think it's not working. But don't stop. It only looks weird because there's no context yet. You have to push through those ugly stages every drawing is going through, because in the end it will all make sense. If you stop too soon, you never get to see how it would have turned out. Working through the ugly stages means trusting the process even when the result isn't clear yet. It means accepting that beauty often comes after the struggle, that every finished piece was once a mess of uncertain lines. So when your work looks awkward or incomplete, don't stop, push through. Have an open mind and judge only when it's finished. Now that I've filled in the background, I started on the shovel. I worked on the background first because I had somewhat an idea in mind of how I wanted to tackle the jacket and the wood, but although I already started on the shovel, I still didn't know how to fill it all in. Every surface, every shadow, every edge comes with its own question: how do I show this with only lines? Drawing is constant problem solving, and texture is where the creativity truly begins. It's not just copying what you see, it's interpreting it. The roughness of bark, the softness of fabric, the shimmer of metal. None of these can be perfectly replicated with only lines. Instead, you invent patterns and marks that suggest them. You might cross-hatch tightly for a coarse texture, or use long flowing strokes for something smooth. For each area, you're making choices. There are no right or wrong ways to draw a specific texture. If you're feeling insecure about a certain area, it might help to try something on a separate piece of paper, preferably the same type of paper. I practiced on a different kind of paper and it wasn't reacting in the same way, so I couldn't get a proper representation of how it was going to look like in the final artwork. I also photographed the drawing, loaded it into Procreate on my iPad and tried some marks digitally, until I was somewhat happy with the outcome. Eventually I just went in. In some cases, like in mine, it means just start and see where it ends up. You can only learn from your experience. Sometimes it's obvious. You can see the wood grain running in a certain direction and you can mimic that texture quite easily. But in other cases, like the shovel with the glove on top and the dirty sand sticking to it, it is less clear and you will have to invent your own way of mimicking a certain texture. That's the beauty of pen and ink. It teaches patience, observation, and the art of inventing your own solutions. And it also doesn't have to be perfect. Some people judge your art based on how well it looks like the reference. But even if you're a photorealistic artist, it never is exactly the same as the reference. You can deviate from the reference if you see fit. Sometimes by choice, sometimes because you have to deal with the limitations of the medium you're working with. For example, the photo shows that the shovel casts a shadow on the wall on the right side of the picture plane. But if you look closely to the highlights and the other shadows, the main light source is coming from the upper right, and there shouldn't necessarily be a shadow on that wall. The photographer probably used a second light to fill in some of the shadows. Someone said to me that they would have left the shadow out and make that wall overall a little bit darker. Now that the drawing is finished, I can see why they said that, but at the time I didn't thought about that. It wasn't necessarily wrong to put a shadow there, because if you're inside a building, you can have the sun as your main light source from an open door or window, for example, while you also have a light source from inside, like a light bulb on the ceiling. What I'm trying to say is, you can leave details from the photo out because you think it doesn't translate very well into your drawing. In the same way, you can add stuff to tell a different story. The reference is just a reference. The art is a product on its own. Usually, no one is showing off their art right besides the reference, so don't judge your skills based on how well it looks like the photo. Judge your work based on how well you could problem solve and adapt to the limitations and capabilities of your medium. Another fundamental element of art I haven't talked about yet is contrast. Because without contrast, even the most detailed drawing can feel flat or lifeless. Contrast is the difference between light and dark, thick and thin, bold and delicate. This reference photo has a lot of contrast. It has beautiful dramatic lighting that separates the boots and the shovel from the background. But if you look closely, the shadow area of the left side of the shoe has almost the same value as the jacket in the background. How do you distinguish one area from the other when it has almost no difference in shade and when there's no color to work with? In pen and ink, contrast isn't just about value, it also lives in the lines themselves. This is what we call line contrast. Line contrast is the variation in thickness, density and direction of your marks. A bold line can feel very loud and can make something into a focal point. A thin, faint line can suggest distance, softness or delicacy. Together, these differences give your drawing energy and depth. Using line contrast well helps separate foreground from background, light from shadow, strength from subtlety. It keeps the viewer's eye moving through the image. But in case of an area like this, where there's no contrast in light or even a distinct change in texture, and values are almost getting lost into each other, just create strokes in a different direction. It'll help the viewer understand where one area ends and another one begins. You can also choose to make one section slightly lighter or darker than the other, if that makes sense in the final artwork. I did both. I have finished this drawing for quite some time now, but I was overwhelmed with all the footage that I had and I loved this drawing so much that I wanted to take the time to make it into a longer video that's not only entertaining but also helpful for you. I don't always like my creations that much and that's totally normal, but once in a while I'll create something that I'm really proud of, like this one. I framed the drawing and it's in the living room where everyone can see it. Sometimes people say, "Oh, you're so talented." It always makes me feel a bit uncomfortable, to be honest, because I know there are way better artists out there, and like any skill, you get better at drawing with pen and ink with practice. But practice doesn't always mean sitting at your desk with a sketchbook. The last pen and ink drawings I made before I started on this were my Inktober pieces from 2022, and most of them I didn't like that much. I am attracted to pen and ink for so long and I want to master it. Some mediums come natural to me, like pyrography and drawing with graphite, but pen and ink has a huge learning curve, although I am aware of all the basics. But when I worked on the Inktober series of 2022, I felt like I couldn't get quite the effect I desired. I felt the need to add ink wash on top to complete the drawing. And while that isn't necessarily wrong, my goal was to create a full pen and ink drawing with only pen without the use of ink wash on top. So after that series I was a bit annoyed with myself and didn't properly draw with the medium for over a year, believe it or not. I never stopped practicing though, but how is that even possible, to practice while not picking up a pen at all? Well, even when you don't draw, you can still see like an artist. Wherever I was, in a car, at the supermarket, drinking coffee at the terrace, I was drawing with my mind. It sounds crazy, but when I saw an object that caught my eye and I noticed the play of light on the surface, the texture of fabric, the curve of a leaf that I liked, I asked myself, how would I draw this? And I was making marks in my mind. So your mind can practice even when your hands rest. Every observation trains your eye. So when you do return to the page, your lines will carry that quiet awareness. For me that was the case, because I made this drawing on watercolor paper with the thought, if it needs ink wash I can add it. But in the end I surprised myself and it didn't need any ink wash. I hadn't drawn for a year and yet I saw so much improvement. I really surprised myself. But in the end, you still need to get that pen on the paper and actually draw. And when you draw, you make mistakes. Anyone does. No matter how skilled and experienced you might be. Work around it or cover them up if you can. But if you can't, don't get too caught up in them. Each blot, each uneven line, each mark outside the border is a small lesson in control, patience and acceptance. This drawing isn't perfect either. It's filled with some small and some huge mistakes, but they are reminders that they were made by a real human hand in a real moment. I've talked about so much things in this video already, and there's probably a lot more to say. But before I shut up, I want to give you some final tips. All those rules about value, contrast, hatching and cross contour lines, they're more guidelines. Invent your own rules. When a piece feels overwhelming, slow down, take a break and come back again later with fresh eyes. Don't try to finish the whole drawing at once. A house isn't built in one day either. Focus on one small section at a time. One shadow, one curve, one patch of texture. See it as a whole bunch of small drawings in one. That will help getting the job done. Bit by bit, the image will take form. And have fun above all. If you have any questions or additions to what I've already discussed, don't hesitate to share them in the comment section below. Please like and subscribe if you found this video helpful, it really helps my channel out. And let me know what you want to see next. I leave you with the rest of the video for now. Have a nice day, until next time.
Thank you for holding. Someone will be with you as soon as possible.